To today's meeting of the East Bay Leadership Council's Infrastructure Task Force, which is being jointly sponsored today with our friends and colleagues from East Bay EDA and Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group. I'm excited that my counterparts, Lynn Naylor and Stephen Bader, are here. Also want to thank Scott Wilson of the Lawrence Livermore National Lab for his working in partnership with Leo Scott to make today possible. In the last 3 years, we have grown our collaboration as organizations to increase the success of our 2 counties in securing the East Bay's share of transportation funding and in improving East Bay commutes. I also want to just recognize the leadership of EBLC's Infrastructure Task Force, including Heather Schiffman, Brian Wenter, James Paxson, Chadi Chasbeck, and the aforementioned Leo Scott. A couple of quick logistical notes. We've muted all participants to ensure good sound quality. We are asking that you put any questions in the chat for our Q&A section of the meeting following the presentations. You'll also have an opportunity, if it's really important that you ask your question yourself, to use the raise hand function on Zoom to get called on if time permits. One quick EBLC announcement. We encourage you to attend our upcoming event on Tuesday, October 27th at 2 o'clock, which will be the conclusion of our 2020 East Bay Leadership Series. It's going to be on racial justice at work, featuring diversity leaders from Safeway, CSAA Insurance, and Twilio, and will be moderated by our past chair, Vic Baker. So details for that are on our website. We're focused today on Interstate 680 as a significant mobility corridor in the Bay. Since it is without a significant parallel route, finding innovative ways to move cars through the corridor without great cost or environmental impact is important. Randy and Tess have been working together with their 2 agencies to do just that. So this hour is an opportunity for us to hear what they are thinking and seeking funds to achieve. It's by no means the only significant corridor in the East Bay. Future co-sponsored events will look at some of the other important corridors and projects. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chadi Chasbeck, the co-chair of EBLC's Transportation Task Force. Thanks, Chadi.
Thanks, Kristen, and welcome everyone to our joint event today. We appreciate you being here. This will be promising a great discussion with our superstars in transportation in the East Bay, so I'm looking forward to what they have to tell us. I'll start with a brief, quick introduction. Alameda County Transportation Commission, ACTC, plans, funds, and delivers transportation programs and projects through Alameda County. Tess Lengyel was appointed almost a year now, the new executive director for the agency in last November, and she oversees the office of about 36 people working on transportation in Alameda County and an overall annual budget of about $500 million. I think I got the number right. And then she's an experienced transportation professional in the planning, development, implementation of major transportation projects, has been part of many major transportation efforts at Alameda CTC, and including the various improvements that Alameda CTC has made over the years in the 680 corridor. And then Alameda CTC also oversees the $8 billion 30-year transportation plan, also known as Measure BB. That's the investment plan for the entire county. Likewise, Contra Costa Transportation Authority plans, funds, and implement transportation improvements in the Contra Costa County, led by Randell Iwasaki, who has served as executive director since 2010. He likes to call his agency the pea shooter agency, right, Randy? Where's Randy? And we'll hear from him about his agency and what they're doing with 680 as well, including a major program defined as Innovate 680 program along the corridor. Randy is experienced in transportation professional with many years at Caltrans and has recently announced his retirement. So maybe we'll save a few minutes at the end to hear from Randy about what's next. With that, I'll thank you all for being here today. We appreciate all the collaborative effort that these 2 agencies are taking to solve the congestion problem along 680 corridor, and we look forward to hear from you. And my mom taught me to be a gentleman and let the ladies go first, so we're gonna ask Tess to go first. We'll start us off, and then we'll hand it back to Randy afterwards. So Tess, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, Chadi. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. If you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. And I know this meeting today is really focused on I-680, but here in Alameda County, I can't help but also talk about I-580. And want to thank you for having me here. I know we have just a short presentation, and then most of the meeting is supposed to be for Q&A, but I just want to start off by saying how important our business partners are and how much I look forward to enhanced partnerships with our businesses as we try to emerge out of COVID and as we try to do major investments in the 680 corridor, in the I-580 corridor, and throughout the Bay Area. There's no need really for me to repeat the importance of 580 and 680 corridors, except to note that really they are workhorses not only for commutes that many of our county employees commute on, but they are also major freight corridors. They are expanding with new technologies on express lanes, and these corridors are continuing to have increasing demand. If you could go to the next slide, please. These are all pre-COVID demand, but we saw massive increases in people traveling from the Tri-Valley into San Francisco and Silicon Valley. We saw that the population and jobs rates in the Tri-Valley have grown faster than the rest of the Bay Area, including where housing is being built. And we see that about 25% of the workers in the area travel to San Francisco or Silicon Valley pre-COVID, and that we've seen over 85,000 daily commutes from San Joaquin Valley. Again, a testament to people trying to find places that they can afford to live while also contributing to a strong economy. Next slide, please. I wanted to just touch for a moment on the importance of goods movement and not to lose sight of that as we're talking about other investments that we're trying to do on 680 and also I-580. But there are a lot of jobs that are goods movement related, and these particular corridors are essential for helping to support our goods movement. We have the Port of Oakland, we have major rail, we have the interstate systems that really are the backbone of our goods movement, but also our local streets end up being part of that distribution, especially now we have more e-commerce happening. So we see lots of warehouses in the Central Valley, a lot of transport of goods over the Altamont. So if you could go to the next slide. Back in 2018, Alameda CTC adopted a work program for both I-580 and I-680, really to support the advancements, a coordinated effort of supporting the advancements of projects that were approved in the expenditure plan or projects that had been in our expenditure plan previously. We wanted to make sure that we could reflect regional and mega regional strategies to expand the express lane network and really look at opportunities for incorporating TDM, technology, transit strategies, first, last mile. And I want to just do a huge shout out to Randell Iwasaki and his staff, especially Tim Hale, who has really brought together, and I know Randy will also talk about this, brought together 4 counties, multiple transit agencies, the region, the state. We're meeting on about a monthly basis to really look at how can we, from Solano County all the way to Silicon Valley, create a really good transportation system on I-680 that is technology focused, first last mile focused, and really provides choices for people who are traveling the corridor. We also wanted to make sure that in the work program that we could ensure that we are ready for funding at the state and regional level for these projects. Next slide, please. The next slide shows a map of the work program for 580 and 680, and you can see that it goes from bridge at the Bay Bridge to the ridge at the Altamont Pass. And we have different specific segments that we've been working on to implement for each element of the 580 work plan. And then you can see we're going from Tri-Valley to Silicon Valley on I-680. And what this picture and these colors and these lines represent are about a $3 to $5 billion package of investments that we're looking at trying to develop and then implement in these corridors. So I wanted to touch a little bit on a couple of the efforts that are underway right now. There's something called a design alternatives assessment. And if you could go ahead and go to the next slide. And some of these are things that we can have lessons learned for I-680. So we did an analysis on I-580, working with MTC, Caltrans, all the cities, from Castro Valley to San Francisco Bay Bridge, to evaluate a myriad set of options, both on the roadway and operations, for implementing improvements in this area of I-580, which had gotten completely congested in the last 7 years or so. And in fact, my commission has allocated $11 million to move forward with early phases on some of these projects. If you go to the next slide, we're looking also at doing this design alternatives assessment on the Dublin grade. We saw before COVID that the Dublin grade was continuing to get increasing backups, particularly coming eastbound. And so we're going to do a design alternatives assessment to look at a multitude of potential investments in this particular segment of the corridor. We're also looking at, if you go to the next slide, the Altamont Pass. We do have an I-580. We have express lanes that go from the 580-680 interchange all the way to Greenville. And we recognize that the Altamont Pass is a really critical piece, not only for the goods movement that I mentioned, but also for the commuters. If you go to the next slide, there are also additional major projects that are happening by our partners. They're being led by our partners in San Joaquin. San Joaquin COG is leading this effort to add high occupancy vehicle lanes on I-205, and that will come up into the Alameda County border. And then of course, our commission just last month amended our transportation expenditure plan to add Valley Link as an eligible fund recipient from the sales tax measure. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who participated in the support of that project. And many of you sent letters, many of you testified at my commission meetings, and that transportation expenditure plan amendment for $400 million was secured just last month, which really provides essential resources for Valley Link to try to attract other funds to leverage those funds. Now moving to the I-680 corridor, I wanted to just note, and Kristen mentioned some of this in her introduction, if you go to the next slide, please, that there really are very limited transit options on the 680 corridor. We don't have any express bus options that go the entire length of Alameda County when you're talking about going from the Tri-Valley to the Silicon Valley. And so what we're doing is we're working with Randy, with Santa Clara County, with Solano County on trying to develop a multimodal corridor from, like I said, Solano all the way down to Santa Clara County. And so this is work that we're continuing to garner interest from the region and the state. And we're looking at putting together, and I think Randy's going to talk about this as well, so I don't want to say everything that we're doing, but putting together a comprehensive suite of projects and programs that we can apply to this corridor and really allow people lots of opportunities as we sort of return and come out of COVID. Next slide is about a project that is a gap closure project on the express lanes. This is from State Route 84 in Alameda County to Costa Boulevard. We have design underway to develop the southbound portion of this project initially, and we were able to combine that with a Caltrans shop project. So that's going to save about $20 million by doing that combination, and we wanted to make sure that Caltrans didn't come in and pave and make everything nice and smooth on I-680, and then we come in 2 years later and rip everything up. So we tried to do really good coordination with the state on bringing state and local and regional funds together on this. We are planning on advertising this project or having it ready to list next year. So we're on a real fast track for this project and expected to have it complete in 2024. That's for the southbound segment. The northbound segment will be further out. We don't have the funds for that at this juncture. If you go to the next slide, please. We are going to be opening the northbound express lane expansion this month from the southern part of Alameda County up to State Route 84, and we will be commencing tolling in spring of 2021 on this project. So I'm super happy we're able to move forward and take advantage of some of the lane closures and extended work hours that COVID offered us on trying to get this construction project complete. And then I can't finish talking about 680 without talking about a couple of other projects. If you go to the next slide, which is on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that we're moving forward with the 84-680 interchange. We're advertising that project in December. It's going to begin construction in early 2021. And it'll be complete in about 2023. So this is that last segment on the Route 84, and then completely redoes the interchange on I-680 at the Route 84-680 interchange. And then last but not least is the State Route 262 cross connector project, which would provide a connection between 680 and 880. That's a large price tag on that project. It's about $1 billion project. And we're going to be moving forward, asking our board for approval to move into the environmental phase. Next month, we're going to ask for that approval. And we're going to continue to move this project forward little by little, just given that it's got a very large price tag, but we recognize the importance of trying to make sure we can have that connection between 680 and 880. And then I could not do this presentation without mentioning one final project, which is the next slide. And that's the 580-680 interchange. I know this is it's been a bottleneck because of issues around freight going through this. The ramp geometry is challenging here. And there was a project study report done in 2009. And what we're looking at is trying to do these other improvements around this particular interchange, the design alternative analysis on the Dublin corridor, the 680 improvements, before we move into this project. This is $1 billion project also. And so we want to see if we can address some of the needs of this interchange and provide some relief prior to moving into $1 billion project specifically on this one. So with that, I'm just going to say a couple things on next steps. We're looking at, if you go to the next slide, making sure that we can do really strong coordination, continue really good coordination with Randy and his team and everyone at CCTA. It is a full team effort that Randy's brought to bear and that I've brought to bear to bring all related components together, as well as engaging Caltrans and MTC. We are going to be moving forward with these analyses on both the grades I mentioned on 580, and then we are still looking at trying to complete funding packages for the projects that are listed here, and we will be helping Valley Link to try to secure the additional funding for implementing the Valley Link rail. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I look forward to Q&A.
Thank you, Tess. That was very good. Thank you, Tess. All right, and we'll go. I'm very happy to hear about opening the northbound lane on 680, by the way. There's as many thousands of people, other people too. Randy, we'll give you the floor next.
Thank you. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Yes, I'm planning on retiring from the public sector here very shortly, but today I'm here to talk about a seamless corridor approach. And I think, as Tess mentioned, one of the concepts that I'm most proud of is we get a lot of complaints sometimes that there's really no coordination along Interstate 680. So you have no HOV lane on 680 in Solano County. It comes into Contra Costa. We just opened the southbound HOV lane a year early, and then it hits Alameda County and it stops, and then it starts again at Sunol, and it stops, and now it's going to start again. And people ask, isn't there any coordination? And I think that Tim got together with the other 3 counties, Alameda, Solano, and Santa Clara, and said, you know, we need to put together a plan to approach this corridor. And so I have some slides that will help maybe go into a little more detail about the concepts that we're trying to implement along 680, because it is a very important corridor. It's a driveway to the Silicon Valley. There's not a lot of transit options along that route. And so one night we were out, and every now and again we go out to the back of the patio after work, and we strategize, as Chadi knows. Chadi's been out there a couple of times, and others. And we developed the 7-pronged approach. And this is about 4 or 5 years ago, and it started with the SMART corridor on Interstate 80, and we expanded that as we discussed what are the strategies to kind of help with congestion along a heavily congested corridor with very, very little options.
Randy,
So
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're seeing your side, your presenter, not the full screen. So if you want to share the different desktop, unless you want to.
Okay, hold on here. Let me see if I can display here.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yep, there you go. Perfect.
And that's technology for you right there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we came up with the 7-pronged approach. You can see that. Now I go into more detail. So Tim was hired about 3 years ago, and he took the 7-pronged approach. By the way, San Diego has the big 5 moves now, and Hassan was telling me you always try to one-up me. I said in this case it's 2 more than 5, but 7-pronged approach, and he windowed it down to 4 major projects. And then last year we got 2 competitive grants from the United States Department of Transportation. One, an ADS grant, and I can go in detail on that. And we got another grant from US DOT. It was an innovation grant called ATC MTD, and it's to develop a mobility as a service platform for first our county, and then second, the Bay Area. So we have a lot of partners along the corridor. We try to round up as many partners as we possibly can to coordinate along this route. I think it's, as Tess mentioned, it's paying dividends. We have everybody in the room. Some are quieter than others, but everybody's at the table, and they can take a look at how we're going to develop this major corridor for the East Bay. We have an integrated team, as was mentioned, so everybody has a say. We have meetings once a month. We have technical meetings, we have policy setting meetings, and I think in our case tonight, we have a policy advisory board meeting with some of our elected officials to keep them engaged as well. So funding, we're about $481 million short. So if the business community had a nice checkbook that had $500 million in it, write us a check, and we can actually finish all this work here very shortly. These are the committed fund sources that you see on the screen now. And then if everything works out right, these are some of the funding sources from the feds, the state, and the region. Now we applied for a build grant, and we did not get that. So we don't get every grant that we apply for. In this case, we didn't get the build grant, but we'll try again. But Senate Bill 1, SB 1 monies, various sources, regional dollars, and then we're still about $200 million short for our segment. Let's see. This is the vision for our corridor. So you can read that as well as I can, but really we're trying to intertwine the connectivity between the automobile and transit. And these are our goals: to improve safety, connectivity, make it a multimodal corridor. Want to prepare the corridor for the future, so we want to make sure that the next generation of technology, whether it's electric vehicles, it's self-driving vehicles, it's your regular car, whatever it is, we're going to try to figure out how to get that corridor ready now as we put it under construction. We only want to do it once. We don't want to go back in there and tear the road up again to get the corridor ready for the future. Air quality is always a big issue here in California. And then lastly, promote equity. And so a lot of times our transportation options don't provide services for the underserved communities and so and people. And so we really kind of focus in at the authority on the elderly, the disabled, and the people that can't afford to own a car and don't have access to transit or choose not to own a car. And so we're trying to make sure that we provide good options for those as well. So we have a mobility plan, and these are kind of the goals that we've identified along the corridor. And I think our partners have adopted them as well. And so that's really kind of in a nutshell. I thought I was one of the slides. I think I sent you the wrong presentation, but we have the 7-pronged approach. I can go into detail if there's more questions about the 7 kind of strategies, but I think that we're working and we're well down the road on putting buses on the shoulder. We call it a part-time transit lane on the outside shoulder and run more express buses, for example. I often ask elected officials when they think that's a bad idea. I said, well, what do you think it's going to cost for us to put 12 feet of pavement on either side of 680? You choose either northbound or southbound. And if you choose southbound, how many of the homes in the frontage road is going to be wiped out? So how many of the homes and the businesses along 680 are going to be wiped out? And do you really think we're going to be able to do that over the next 25, 30 years? But yet we have 10 feet of pavement that we can actually beef up the structural section, make sure the drainage facilities accommodate the added weight, and we can run express buses down the shoulder. And so we're working on legislation to make it a part-time transit lane for public buses only, publicly operated buses only. That's what the California Highway Patrol would like to do. I mentioned that we wanted to prepare the corridor for the future. We're also looking at making sure that the smart mobility hubs, park and ride lots, they're outfitted with the next generation of technology to make the handoff between modes. In the old days, you had a bus, you had a train, and you had BART, a subway. Now you have those 3, you have car share, you have bike share, you have all these other mobility options, but where do you go to get all that information? And so that was one of the grants that we received last year, was to build what they call a mobility on demand, or in Europe, it's called mobility as a service. So the platform is designed to integrate all your mobility options into a platform, and the services it provides are scheduling, trip planner, uniform payment. We like the idea of preparing or providing rewards and incentives. So if you're on BART leaving San Francisco Airport, coming to Walnut Creek, it takes you about an hour and 20 minutes. So during that time, and this is a scientific fact, I was on BART and I studied this very carefully when I used to travel, is that about 75% of all the riders on BART are looking at their cell phone or looking at an iPad. And so if you can capture the attention for an hour and a half and you can funnel advertising through your smart device and the advertiser pays for that screen time, the transit operator can get a piece of the pie, the rider can get a piece of the pie back into their wallet, and others can get a piece of that pie. And so we're looking at rewards and incentives. And lastly, I think this is an important part, is uniform payment. You don't want to whip out a credit card, a Clipper card, and another credit card to take a journey from point A to point B. And then lastly, we're testing, this is an American-made shared autonomous vehicle. And so we're testing first and last mile. We're on our 3rd phase. We wore out the first 2. We have 2 of these at Gomentum Station, and they're going to be part and parcel to our automated driving system grant and our mobility as a service grant. We're going to try to integrate the fleet management system that's going to basically calculate where these vehicles are going to be and how to pick people up and drop them off. We're going to integrate that fleet management system into that mobility as a service app. So I think that's in a nutshell. And then of course, we're going to finish the HOV lane, and we're going to try to figure out how to braid the ramps to get rid of the weaving that's along Interstate 680. And those strategies work anywhere else along Interstate 680. So we're excited about the prospects, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Randy. Great
You're welcome.
presentation. We'll start with a couple of questions. So just a reminder for everybody, please chat your question into the chat box. if you have a question, or if you prefer to ask in person, just use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and we will call upon you, and Lindy will unmute you to ask a question. So start off with, I think, Randy, you touched a little bit on the transit service and the seamless transit service, but maybe you can speak more from a entire corridor perspective, and Tess as well. What's the overall vision for the corridor from an integrated transit service, from Fairfield all the way to the Silicon Valley? Is there discussions among the 4 counties about how to do that? And then how do the mobility hubs fit within that scenario? And maybe we'll start. Yeah, Randy, go ahead.
You want Tess to go first? Ladies first?
No, I was asking to go first. Go ahead, since you finished on that topic, so we'll start back from you and then end it there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have started discussions with the transit operators. As one of the slides showed, the transit operators are part and parcel and a very important part to the partnership. And we have begun discussions about running express bus services from Solano's park and ride lot all the way out into Silicon Valley. And on a more closer note, Rick Ramesher at County Connection has talked with Michael Tree at LAVTA about how do we integrate their service all the way down to the Silicon Valley, so that you've got BART hubs, smart mobility hubs, to make the handoff between BART, protect the connection on an express bus to get those folks down to Alameda or down to the Silicon Valley. And then the idea is ultimately, if you can get them on the shoulder, because what happens now is those express buses, what they do is they merge across 4 lanes of interstate, and then they'll get into the HOV lane. Let's say they're going to head down to Silicon Valley. Well, they're going 65 miles an hour, and the 900 cars behind them want to go 70, 75 miles an hour. And so everybody's upset. You cause a ripple effect as the buses weave across, and then you have a snail effect when they're only going 65, although that's a speed limit. So the idea is to keep those buses on the outside shoulder when the speed drops, the average speed drops below 35 miles an hour. And then they'll be outfitted with sensors to make sure that they can see and they're aware of what's ahead of them in case if they have to merge back into the lane. In our case, those discussions have already started. Michael Tree and I know Rick Ramesher have had those discussions with our team here on how do we integrate the service, because at the end of the day, it's really about the customer. It's not necessarily about whose transit property is carrying the most passengers. Everybody wins if those buses are providing service to the customers that need that service. And so that's really where it started. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue those discussions and actually implement something when we get these projects underway.
Yeah, Chetty, if I could, I would just add that I think, everybody is really interested in this corridor working group that we're on to make sure that we can put people-focused things that work for people to have choices on the corridor and have choices on how they get to the transit services, choices on how they use the transit services. And so clearly, the first thing is bringing everybody together to talk and to create a plan. And that's exactly what we're doing. And that's being led by Tim Hale under Randy right now. And bringing everybody together. At some point, we're going to have to really understand the market and where people are going so that we can craft the right level of services. We can craft the right mobility hub spots where people will need to come on and off. There was a question about how do mobility hubs relate to this. And so that we can really serve what that market is demanding right now and doesn't have right now.
So I'll start maybe building on that. We're 7 or 8 months into a pandemic and the COVID-19 situation, which has changed all the travel patterns, all the types of trips, a lot of changes in our transportation network at the moment. Do you see any change in the purpose and need of the current 680 plans? And how does this COVID-19 change has impacted anything you're doing in plans, or is it still too early to tell? Tess, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, everybody is wanting to crystal ball what's going to happen with COVID, and none of us have a crystal ball, but if we look back to other catastrophic events and how have communities emerged from them. I mean, we can go back all the way to, like, you know, 14th century when you look at the bubonic plague in Florence, which wiped out half the city, and then the Renaissance came after that. If you look back just the last century, we had the 1917, 18 Spanish flu, which was, you know, sort of our most recent of this global pandemics. And then we had the roaring 20s after that, you know, and even just in 1998, we had a downturn, and then we had the dot-com boom, and then we had the dot-com bust in 2001 too. And then we had, you know, the Great Recession starting in 2008 and this enormous boom after that. And now we're in a bust situation. And I think out of each of those, people have innovated. And that is what I think that we need to do. As human beings, we love to be together. You know, this Zoom is maybe a way that will carry us into something new in the future, but ultimately, I would imagine, just looking back at history, people want to be together. We're social beings, and that's where lots of exchange of ideas happen. And so I think this is really the time to press forward, not step back, but to press forward, to bring collections of people together who might not be our normal set of people that we coordinate with, and really try to get things moving. Because I personally believe, just looking back at history, that we're going to see, you know, increases in our transit services on our road. We're already seeing it on our roadways because people aren't feeling comfortable right now to use transit. But I think we're going to move into another boom cycle after this, and we have to plan for that, and we have to, I believe, be bold in coming together to do something about it.
Okay. Randy?
Yeah, just add a couple points there. I have a saying, we used to have a saying when I was at Caltrans: with every disaster comes great opportunity, and this is a disaster for sure. But what it's done is we've developed a tool with our consultants to take a look at the percentage of people working from home. The BART ridership, is it up or is it down? What is the percentage? Because as you know, BART carries underneath the bay as many as the Bay Bridge carries over the bay on a daily basis. And now it's not that way post or during the pandemic. What's the percentage of unemployment? And then what are the occupancy in the vehicle, to try to predict the future and how we deal with that. So I think it underscores the importance of good data right now to figure out, okay, how do we plan the future? And then the other piece is, as we go back to work, it underscores the importance of land use and how we invest our dollars in as people go back to work. Because if everybody went back to work tomorrow, we'd have a real problem with our transportation system, because there's too much demand, not enough supply. And so how do we tactfully and gracefully and effectively kind of meter that back to work? And then the other phenomenon we're seeing, and we don't know how to deal with this, is a lot of people that used to live in those 800 square foot apartments around the BART station in San Francisco and the financial district, they're moving out. They're coming out toward the suburbs because they want a backyard and they want to run around and do all the things that we get to do out here in the East Bay. And so how do we deal with that immigration or migration of people out of the urban core back into the suburban where it's nice to live, as we all know, but they're trying to take advantage of that. So we don't have any clear-cut answers other than land use is very important. That's a priority for us. How do we figure out after the pandemic we made the right decisions? How do we place the places of work with where you live? How do we then meter people back to work properly so that they're going back to work and being productive and the economy keeps going, and those kinds of things. So we're really trying to figure that out now. And then the other thing, I think, during the pandemic, we do construction as well on the state highway system, so we're responsible for that. And I think it was March the 11th, I called Caltrans and said, hey, we want to work during the day. And it took a week to get that answer. And we had to go to the secretary's office actually in Sacramento to get that answer. The undersecretary finally said, okay. But we work during the day. So a lot of times people complain about noise at night. They complain about the dust at night. In this case, we worked with a contractor and moved those operations to the day. time, and we still got complaints, hey, it's too noisy during the day. But a year advancement on a project, that means your rate of return, you're a year advanced, so people get access to the HOV lane a year early. And that's really where we get in the public sector and the transportation side. That's our rate of return. And so, and then we also put open graded asphalt rubber down. And so I had them take near field and far field measurements before and after that asphalt rubber went down. And we've got up to 16 dB decibel drop in noise. And if you think in terms of the sound wall, that's a 5 dB drop. And so we're getting up to 16 decibels, which is, I think it's an anomaly, but on average about 4.5 dB reduction. And so hopefully when every dust settles, people are driving again, they're gonna, boy, that freeway is a lot quieter, what happened? So those things we're allowed to do that because of the bad times we're in, but it did provide opportunity to accelerate construction.
Well, Randy, I live 600 feet from the sound wall on 680, so the quieter you can make it, the happier I am. So, all right. So another question, kind of building on what you just mentioned, Randy. So you mentioned land use, which is a key part of, obviously all the transportation work that we do, and the migration that's happening from dense urban areas to the suburbia. That's across the country is happening, and even out of state. But besides land use, are there any conversations happening with the businesses in Contra, Costa, and in Alameda that you're currently having that can shape how we come out of this pandemic on the mobility front, and we shape the new mobility opportunity that comes out of it, and any future transportation investment as well? Is there anything that's happening on that front with the employers and the businesses?
I think I've been here for 10 years, and we've had they used to be called CMA group meetings, I think, Tess, and now they're called BACTA meetings. I forgot what BACTA means, but for the first time, at least in the 10 years that I've been here, we invited Jim Wonderman to address our group to express our concerns about everybody going back to work. How are we gonna approach this delicate process of getting people back to work and making sure the transportation system is ready, make sure it's clean, and all those kinds of things. That was the first time, and we can have Kristen on the next meeting. But I think it deserved a discussion at the time, just to have everybody sit down with the association leaders and say, okay, from a transportation perspective, we only have X amount of capacity. There's going to be a lot more demand depending on the decisions that businesses make. And that's what sometimes frustrates me, is the school district will cite a school in an area that has no transit and no roadways and no signalized operations. And then the school opens, and then they're calling Caltrans up or CCT up and saying, how come we don't have a signal there? How come we don't have better roads? How come we don't have transit? Well, nobody told us anything. And so I think to credit the 9 Bay Area County CMA executive directors is we all got together and said, hey, this is a good opportunity to start engaging the business community.
Tess, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, Chetty, I just add, I think that our business partners are partners that we need to work much more closely with. And I think on the 680 corridor, I think that's going to be a really big opportunity for us once we get a little bit more coalesced around what we're doing, is to start to have opportunities for business engagement in what we're looking at, and for us to listen to what are the business needs and what are the business challenges that folks are facing, and how can transportation be part of making those solutions. So I think these forums are great, but I think we need to have more opportunities to have these multi-counties, multi-transit operators, and businesses come together to have dialogue and listen and formulate what is important.
I think I speak for EBLC and our two sister agencies. We're happy to partner with you on those conversations, of course, to shape how we come out of this pandemic together. Switching topic, there's the Plan Bay Area effort that's going on right now, and I'm going to ask both of you to also address that. With a 19% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions goal, that's shaping a lot of what goes into the Plan Bay Area as programs or as projects. Obviously, that's a pretty aggressive goal, and we're challenged as a region to meet it. Would like you to address how this has been impacting your plans and your ability to deliver projects, transportation projects, particularly those that are considered capacity increasing, but really they are, gap closures, such as, the 84, for example. You mentioned that with the gap closure on the express lanes on 262, and similar on 680 and Highway 4. Have you seen any impact of that Plan Bay Area effort, and how you're dealing with that? We'll start with you, Tess, this time.
Okay, yeah, Chadi, I'll start off, and I think you hit it right on the head that the state has put out basically it's a goal, but basically it's a mandate that the region has to meet this 19% per capita reduction of GHG emissions. And that is a really hard bar to meet, especially when you look at transportation doesn't move the needle that much. It's really the land use, it's really economy, so many other things that affect those greenhouse gas emissions. So I say that MTC has been under an enormous amount of pressure to try to deal with that. And I think that they've been trying to think really outside of the box. A lot of the 35, implementation efforts that they're trying to move forward, some of them are not legislatively authorized right now. There have to do a lot more analysis on them. And so we'd have to see, like all lane tolling, for example, that is going to have to be evaluated much more. But the effect, to your specific question about the effect on our plans, the capacity increasing projects were not essentially allowed to be in the plan unless they showed a major offset with bike, ped, and transit investments, or they were 100% locally funded. No regional, no state, no federal, which is challenging because we only have a certain amount of local funds, and the local funds are intended to be leveraged to use state and federal funds. So really, it's a squeezing point for us. And I think that there are some expansion projects that are really going to, like you said, close the gaps, create opportunities. And when Randy and I are talking about this, the work of Innovate 680 and carrying that good work all up and down the corridor, there are real opportunities that some of those small expansion projects can capture when you add in the mobility hubs, when you add in the transit, when you add in the technology. And so it's been tough, but I also just have to say that MTC is also in a really hard situation, because if they don't meet that, we are not eligible. And if they have to do an APS, an alternative planning strategy, instead of the sustainable community strategy, we're not eligible to go after state SB1 funds. And so that's a hammer that is out there with the state that is very challenging. It's very challenging, and MTC is, trying hard to work this balance with locals, which are saying, wait a minute, we do actually need these projects, and the state saying you have to meet this greenhouse gas emissions reduction target.
It's a very aggressive goal that puts a lot of pressure on each county to try to satisfy their transportation needs. We live in a very diverse region. So when Tess talks about all lane tolling, you can get a comment from I love that idea to I really don't like that idea. And so as you move, I think, further to the east, you get more of that's a bad idea. And so the pendulums, it's not one size fits all. So you can't say that there's certain strategies that will eliminate or reduce greenhouse gases to the goal without having some pushback from other areas. I think in our case, and I've watched Tess and her the projects that she's working on, we're pretty much in sync on trying to get more people in transit, try to provide more biking opportunities. But that greenhouse gas reduction goal is a very difficult target to hit. I think the other piece is when you add Senate Bill 743 in there with the VMT reduction requirements, it's getting very, very complicated to get anything built anymore. And we're going to have to kind of do a wholesale look at the project selection and how we select those projects. And maybe we spend more time dealing with the land use issues and less time widening freeways. In Contra Costa County, we have Interstate 680, very important. We got the northbound lane to finish. And then we've got the crossroads to Contra Costa 684. It's Commissioner Pierce's, or Chair Pierce's favorite project, 684. Very complicated, very expensive. And so those are the last two projects that we need to get finished out in the central part of the county. As you go head east, we want to put a connector between Byron Highway and Vasco to connect that Byron Airport. But that's a greenhouse gas increasing project, and so they don't like that project. So we're sometimes at odds with that. So it's a very difficult goal. I think with Governor Newsom's goal of all cars being electric by 2035, we're starting to work on our EV readiness plan phase 2 and trying to get there in other ways besides just not working on any highway project.
Okay. Since you touched on Highway 4, Randy, do you want to just maybe talk more about the rest of Highway 4 and what plans you have for that? And that's, just like that's covered 580, it's a major feeder into the 680 corridor and a major mobility corridor for Contra Costa County. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
You're talking about heading east, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so recently we won a competitive grant from the state to study an extension of a BART or a BART-like transit option down the median all the way out to the BART transit hub. So that's underway now. As you extend further on, we've just signed a 4-city agreement on trying to look at how do we implement, in this case, a new technology called Glideways, a fixed guideway on-demand pod system. How do we deploy that out in East County to eliminate the need to widen the arterials out into because they want to redevelop the northern waterfront. So you're going to have goods in, goods out. You're going to have people in, people out. And are you going to widen every road in Antioch, Pittsburgh, and the rest of them? No. And so then how do we leverage technology to get the workers in and out and the goods in and out? And so many, many years ago, Contra Costa used to be a jobs-rich, employee-poor. So we had people coming into Contra Costa to work on that waterfront, the manufacturing. And as all that closed up, the smart people in Contra Costa then drive to San Francisco or take BART in San Francisco and start driving out to the Silicon Valley. And so we're trying to finish for all practical purposes, is finished all the way out to Balfour now. And so we got some state grants. We got a grant from MTC to finish the interchange at 4160. So that road is pretty well. We're looking at the next generation of transit options, the extension of BART all the way out to Antioch. It carried 1 million passengers in less than 6 months. And so it was very surprising, the popularity of that line. People were standing on the platform. We still need another train. But I mean, those are things that we're working on, and we're not necessarily going to widen 4 all the way out to wherever. We're trying to figure out how do we get transit options all the way out there. And then they just built a junior college at Marsh Creek in Brentwood with no transit options. And so we're trying to figure out that as well.
Okay. All right, well, we're 5 minutes to our time, so fortunately I can't take any more questions, but I want to take the last few minutes of our time to, since Randy, you announced your retirement, we want to maybe give you a chance to tell us what's next, if you can share, and on behalf of East Bay Leadership Council and everyone else, all the other organizations, want to thank your leadership for CCTA and all the contributions you've done to the county and to CCTA and all the major projects you've led here. We're going to miss you dearly and really appreciate the leadership and the contribution you did. And I don't know what you can share with us about your next plan, but everybody is anxious to hear them.
Oh, are you making an offer, Chadi?
That's what you want, let me know.
I don't really know what I'm going to do next. I do know that so I bought 5 years of service in PERS. And so I have 42 years in PERS, I 10 years. And, you know, as a manager, sometimes you wonder, is the organization, is it plateaued? Are we doing enough? Are your ideas not good enough anymore? And is it time for somebody else and have different views and different leadership? And for me, it's probably the right time to leave. I don't plan on leaving the industry. I just plan leaving public service. I think we have a great team at CCTA. I think our board is fantastic. And one of the reasons why we innovate the way we do is because we have great synergy between staff and the board. And we have a saying, if we fail, we learn the most from failure and fail fast and move on. And the board really kind of supports that. They haven't fired me for any, you know, the mess ups that we do. And I think that's really I tell elected officials, if you want to innovate, you got to support your staff. And that we've had just fantastic support over at least the 10 years that I've been here. So I have no plans to leave the area. This is, if you know PERS, you got to retire and you get, you know, all that stuff. So I'm doing that. But if you, I love transportation, and hopefully I'll stay in the transportation business. Maybe I'll maybe I'll go work for a contractor.
Hint, hint.
I'll come
I'll
up
be
for
like
TRI.
Bullsizer and I'll build a SR-125 for him.
Sure thing, Randy. Come on down.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you. Thanks.
well, I want to thank our speakers today. Thank you so much for your time and for your very well thought presentation ideas. I appreciate your input. As business organizations, we're very happy to collaborate with you on 680 and other plans for the East Bay, and be a united front in advocating for transportation dollars for the region. And look forward to continue our collaboration, and thank our audience who joined us today. Sorry I didn't get to go through all your questions, but we're short on time, but we appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chadi. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.